Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Product School webinar. Thanks for joining us today. Just in case you didn't know, Product School teaches product management, coding, data analytics, digital marketing, UX design, and product leadership courses online and our 16 campuses worldwide. On top of that, every week we offer some amazing local product management events and host online webinars, live streams, and Ask Me Anything sessions. Head over to productschool.com after this webinar to check them out.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Product School webinar. My name is Johanna, Group Product Manager at Nuna. Today, I'll be presenting how to succeed as a product manager in the government space. More specifically, first I'll be going over some of the key differences between private and public sectors. Secondly, I'll be going over the challenges of product management in the government space. And last but not least, I'll be going over some of the key skills in succeeding as a product manager in the government. But first, I'll share a little bit about me. I currently work for a healthcare data analytics company called Nuna, leading product and strategy for the government healthcare space. I served as a product manager on the data warehouse system that enabled the collection, processing, storage, and analytics upon all Medicaid utilization and claims data. The goal of that product was to enable analysts to conduct holistic analysis by using Medicaid claims data, financials data, programs data, and more to understand how different states' Medicaid programs were performing. Then the reports would have an impact in shaping the funding and direction of the future of Medicaid programs in hopes to improve the lives of 74 million Medicaid enrollees. Well, I started my career as a linguist for the State Department, and I absolutely loved it. Then got into human language technology. I picked up project management along the way and loved bringing things to the finish line. But as I got more involved as a project manager, understanding the ins and outs of the product and users' needs, I naturally pivoted over to product management. Before working in the healthcare space, I worked in law enforcement, notably with the FBI, building their crisis management system that gets deployed during any and all crises, such as Boston Marathon bombing and Las Vegas shooting. You can see that even though I've been working in the government, I've had the fortune to learn about different verticals and functions of work. So, as any good product managers would ask, who is the customer? What is the federal government? Well, federal government is the largest enterprise with the most number of red tapes. It serves over 327 million people, plus more. It has 137 independent agencies that conduct various tasks that sometimes overlap, sometimes complement. And lastly, they work on a yearly budget system based on Congress interest and who's running the House or the Senate. Well then, what are some of the key differences between the private and public sector? Well, let me tell you a story, one for the private side and the other for the public side. I own an iPhone and I love it dearly. Before I bought the phone, I did a comparative analysis. I looked at Samsung Galaxy, I looked at Google Pixel, and I looked at the iPhone. I looked at reviews online and I compared it with the pros and cons. But ultimately, I decided to go with the iPhone because I really liked its camera feature. I've now had it for about 3 years and have seen that iPhone take many photos, but maybe it's now nearing its end time because now it's lagging a bit and freezes now and then. Sometimes I can't even finish typing a reply back to my text messages because my phone freezes. I should get a new phone. Well, that's a story for the private sector. For the public sector, let's say I'm an analyst at the FBI. I'm chosen which system I'm going to be using to respond to the Las Vegas shooting. I'm inside a command post, a few blocks away from the instance, trying to triage just the millions of tips I received. This system that was chosen for me to use to respond to this was built 15 years ago with the best of the best technology 20 years ago. I'm in my command post And suddenly, my system stops working and it freezes and it's out of commission for 3 minutes. And in that 3 minutes, I frantically try calling help desk to find out what's going on because I'm afraid I might have just missed a key evidence to catch the victim or to learn about the motive behind the shooting that could prevent another shooting from happening again. Again, I didn't choose a system. This system doesn't look pretty like my iPhone. This system is a little bit clunky at times, but I can't replace it. So I need to make the best out of it. So these stories that I shared about the iPhone and the crisis management system. These stories are not far from the truth. In the private sector, in the commercial sector, the users can choose what they want when they want it. And they have a variety of choices that they can go to. But in the government, things are chosen for you, especially as an end user, by your executive management, based on the contractors that the executive management decided to, pick. And the systems in the government are not easily replaceable like iPhones every 2 to 3 years. And so it's incredibly important to have good product management practices and excellent product managers who are building great systems for end users to protect our American public. Well, sometimes it's not that easy. There are so many stakeholders within the government and even in that agency, and some of them like your idea and some don't. And it's a challenge to get everyone on the same page. Every stakeholder has their own desired outcome. Every stakeholder has their own motivation, not because out of ill intention, but these different groups and divisions focuses on different things. And so when they look at the system, they look at it in a slightly different perspective that sometimes overlap, but sometimes they don't. And not only that, there are so many red tapes that a product team has to work with. I've experienced when I was building a system and I proposed it to the government client and everyone said, oh yeah, this is great. But literally 24 hours later, they came back to me and said, Johanna, there is a new policy that's coming out in 6 months and we have to get ready for that, and we can no longer support your decision on the technical direction. There are so many things and bureaucratic needs that you have to think about working in the government, and that could be challenging. But the mission is so important. And whichever one of the 137 agencies you work for, it all carries an important mission to serve the American public. Whether it's you work for the VA, the Veterans Affairs, in helping them register for their medical needs. Whether it is you work for Homeland Security and building a website to allow refugees asylum to be processed faster. Whether you work for a local government and you are helping the people below the poverty line get housing. Whatever it is, the mission is so great and we need the best of the best. Well, so what are some attributes of a successful product manager in the government? I would say the number one attribute that is needed, hands down, is you have to be an excellent relationship manager. And people might say, what? How does that have to do with product management? In the government, anywhere in life, a lot of people say it's who you know versus what you can do. But especially in the government where everything is paper trail, everything is face-to-face, having good relationship, and especially with the number of stakeholders that you have to manage, if you have the ability to listen without ego, communicate with empathy, and deliver on what you promised, that will take you further so far than any other attributes. And When I say listen actively without ego, I really mean it. There are a lot of engineers, product managers that come into the government and think, oh man, this system is terrible. And sometimes they say it to the government folks and stakeholders. And of course, they're going to get offended. But, there were reasons why those were in place. And so listen actively to why they did the things they did without ego. Communicate. Even though you may not understand, put yourself in their shoes and where they are and communicate with empathy. And lastly, it's really delivering on what you promised. And it starts with the little things. If you tell them you're going to follow up with them tomorrow, then follow up with them tomorrow. If you tell them that you're going to deliver on this epic or this project in 6 months, then make sure you do. Or if you can't, make sure you raise it as a risk early on. It's all about communicating. It's all about building trust and providing good customer service. But I would say being an excellent relationship manager is one of the key attributes in succeeding in the government. Next, going off of the actively listening without ego, it's respecting the legacy. There are legacy systems that have been built 15, 20, 30 years ago that the government had to build. And they haven't had funding to appropriate to make it better. Or maybe they didn't know or they didn't have the expertise. First, find out the history of the legacy system. Talk to various stakeholders and users to understand the gaps in the process. People know that their systems are not perfect. However, if you come in without respecting what was done before, respecting those that came before you and say, oh, why is it like this? Like, oh, this is terrible, blah, 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 then you're going to have an incredibly hard time gaining the respect if you don't respect first. And the third point is important for respecting the legacy. Determine if the problem can be solved not only through technology, but process improvements. Oftentimes, I've seen people who come in have great ideas, and they are legitimate. But sometimes you can't solve an issue that the government is facing purely with technology. You need to couple it with process improvements. And so be mindful of that, create a process map and identify the gaps and see where you can inject the technology and not the other way around. Don't build a technology and try to build a process around the technology. Build the process and then inject the technology. The third attribute is adaptability. Adapting to the agency norms. Can you pick up on the culture of that particular agency? What are the organizational dynamics? Figure out the communication norms. Adapt the lingo that they use. If they call a form a certain way, then don't call it the way that you're calling it right now. Adapt it so that you are coming off not as an outsider, but you are coming off as someone who's trying to understand where they're coming from, and you are willing to speak the way they speak and listen. This was particularly important for me when I worked at the FBI. When I first came, I absolutely had no idea about the culture, and I was talking to an FBI agent, and I said, oh yeah, do your teams go out and protect? And we're talking about the crisis management system that we're about to build together. And she told me, do not ever use the word teams. And I was so puzzled because at the FBI, I would imagine that everyone's in teams trying to save the communities, right? But they called it different. They called it squads, and you would think, what's the difference between team and a squad? Well, it meant a lot to the agents that I've spoken to. And even in that small example that I just told you, that's how I gained the trust and respect of the FBI agents that I worked with. I ate with them, I spoke with them, and I figured out how they wanted to be communicated to, and I tried to adopt as quickly as possible. Next, this might seem as it's conflicting with all the things that I've just went over, but you have to be a product advocate. What does that mean? You have to, one, stand up for your users, but also, two, stand up to your users and be comfortable saying no to your users and stakeholders. And I say this is so important is because when a government agency is trying to build a system, they often try to cram in as many features as they can. They try to build this one and all-in-one system that will handle everything, and they get really excited, and it's great. However, you slowly lose your product brand and what that product was all about. And so as a product manager, your job is to go out and solicit user needs and their desired outcomes. However, it is the product manager's job to protect what the original intent of that product was supposed to be and stand up for the product. And I want to differentiate the definition between users and stakeholders. Stakeholders are those that pay for the product. Users are the ones that utilizes the product. And you might be wondering, why is that different? Well, in the government, the executive directors and executive management makes a decision based on the reports that they get. Oh, okay, I see, based on this report, there is a need in the Medicaid space to put out a contract out to build a data warehouse. Okay, well, they put out the contract, another company wins it and starts building the system. But it's not the executive management team who's using the data warehouse or is using the BI tools like MicroStrategy or SAS to conduct the analysis. So there is that huge disconnect. So as a product manager, you have to advocate and stand up for your users. And sometimes you have to stand up to your users. And what's really important in all of this is learning your negotiation styles and tactics. Everyone's a little bit different. I like to use humor to lighten up the mood a little bit because I am so used to working in an environment where I enter a room and I'm usually the only female or minority in the room, and everyone has guns or everyone has a very strong opinion of what they're going to say in that meeting. But I love to use humor to diffuse the tension and go along that way. And so everyone has their negotiation style and tactics, and I can definitely have another webinar to talk about the negotiation style. But I would really figure out what are your strengths in terms of communication and what are your weaknesses and how can you play up those strengths. And that's it, really. The things that I would want everyone to remember is that government is incredibly complex. You have so many stakeholders, users, and not only that, government is made up of government employees that go through USA Jobs, but also contractors that they hire. And so there are people dynamics, there are laws and policies that you have to follow, and sometimes it's never simple. But really, secondly, problems have real life consequences. It's incredibly important to do the right thing. And so in order to get there, be respectful of those that came before you. Know and recognize that people did things for a reason, and the good ideas you had people had them before as well. But it's a matter of how can you execute it? How can you respect what was laid before you and take it home successfully? And so I really hope that this webinar was informative. This webinar is for those who are interested in pivoting over to civic tech. This webinar is interested in those who are just new and beginning to explore what civic tech is like as a product manager, or even as a project manager, or even as a software engineer, to figure what that's like. And so I just want to say thank you so much for listening in. If you have any questions or comments, my email is on the screen. It's Johanna@Nuna.com. Please feel free to email me and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Thanks so much and have a great day. Bye.